She sat down on the soft couch, her nervous movements accompanied by characteristic sniffling, and she weakly attempted to oppose her domineering mother. "Mom," she began, her voice barely trembling, "I don't want to marry this old man. I've never even seen him and feel no love for him." Her pleas were filled with trembling. However, Jacqueline only became even angrier, looking at her daughter with unwavering determination. "Don't anger me, child," she sternly said. "You don't even know who this Fred is. He's a businessman, a banker, and he's only 28. And you, dear, who are you? You've already squandered your chance, and how do you plan to live and on what money? With him, you'll be living in luxury, and you'll thank me later," Jacqueline shouted with the authority of a dictator. Rachel didn't back down. "But I wanted to become an educator like Dad and teach children. I was planning to apply next year. I'm only 18, Rachel desperately interjected, fighting for her dreams and the future she saw so differently. The woman flared up even stronger, her voice filled with anger. "What, haven't we already spent a fortune on you? Costumes, competitions. You want us to support you for another 4 years? Chinoy, you know how we live. Your dad barely makes any money, and it's all for nothing. And you're the same. One educator is enough for me. It's all settled." Rachel tried once again to express her doubts and desires, but her mother's words were like an unyielding stone, not open to discussion. "We're having dinner with your colleague on Sunday," her mother said, reinforcing her position. "We'll talk about the wedding as well. Look, do whatever you want with your life, but make sure that Fred wants to marry you. Go wash up, and don't cry," her mother concluded, leaving her daughter with a heavy heart. Rachel walked to her room. On the wall hung the ill-fated bright red ballroom costume that she despised, just like the color red in general. But, as always, nobody asked for her opinion. The costume was chosen by her mother, based on her own taste, ignoring her daughter's protests. And now the result was clear. Rachel didn't feel comfortable in it, as if it were alien, not reflecting her true essence. She felt constricted, nervous, all her movements were unnatural, and she couldn't perform at her best in competitions. But how could she explain this to her mother? The girl took off the costume with a mixture of sadness and anger, encountering the wall between her dreams and her mother's expectations. From her earliest childhood, little Rachel gave the impression of being a delicate and tender girl, like a slender stem swaying in the wind. She possessed a stunning beauty that amazed everyone with its flawless charm, enormous blue eyes resembling 2 deep lakes, surrounded by long, thick eyelashes, full lips, and a figure created in the image of swan-like grace. Her long hair, like a waterfall, cascaded down to her shoulders, and its wheat-colored shade added to her allure. Her waist was so graceful that it seemed one could encircle it with a single hand. In terms of her character, the girl presented herself as an extremely timid and reserved individual, always polite and cultured, like a quiet gray mouse. However, despite this shyness, a brilliant mind was hidden within her little chest. She excelled academically and impressed with her knowledge. In their family, the dominant role was played by her mother, Jacqueline, who skillfully managed the finances and gave directions on where to go and what to do. Rachel's father, Wright, was a history teacher. He harbored tender feelings for his daughter and was somewhat afraid of her brilliance, never engaging in conflicts and avoiding family disputes. For Wright, making decisions was much simpler than enduring the endless shouts and reproaches from his wife, Jacqueline. Wright, a man of calm disposition, possessed a considerable reservoir of patience when it came to Jacqueline, despite her frequent irritations. He affectionately referred to his daughter as Little Flower and often found the strength to console and comfort her, even when she had recently started showing signs of irritation. Jacqueline, on the other hand, considered her husband an absolute failure, incapable of earning enough money. She did not spare him in her criticisms and regarded him as a useless presence. When Jacqueline realized that her daughter was also beginning to acquire similar character traits, her anger only grew. There wasn't a single aunt in the family, and this also irritated Jacqueline. She convinced herself that if only she were as energetic and determined as she believed herself to be, the family situation would be completely different. While Rachel tenderly loved her father and fully understood how difficult things were for him, they often strolled together in the park, sat by the window, and Wright would tell her captivating stories, and she hung on to his every word. Her dad was always kind and gentle with her, and their souls resonated harmoniously, like music, strengthening their bond even further. This infuriated Jacqueline, even after her husband's death, and she was never able to repair her relationship with her daughter. In response to her daughter's dramatic behavioral changes, the mother decided to employ a new approach. She tried to relax and impose her own standards of behavior on Anne. But unfortunately, this only worsened the situation. Her daughter began to cry, and isolation from the outside world became her routine response to stress and misunderstanding. In light of this, the mother made the decision to enroll Anne in a ballroom dance school, hoping that it might help her break free from her insecurities and become more sociable. At first, the girl felt out of her element. Her movements were clumsy and stiff, but her experienced instructor, Grace, quickly found a way to connect with her. Rachel's talents, her hard work, and perseverance began to yield results, and gradually, the girl started showing excellent performance. She particularly enjoyed the Viennese waltz and the foxtrot. She would close her eyes and immerse herself fully in the world of dance, displaying graceful turns, flexibility, and soft, feminine movements. The rumba presented a more challenging test, but here she found a reliable dance partner, Ben. He complimented her, supported and encouraged her, and also took on a significant portion of responsibility for the complex movements, creating a sense of comfort and confidence for Rachel on the dance floor. Anna tried not to pay attention to Ben, although she had long been in love with him and dreamt that he would notice her feelings and make the first move. Without deciding to confess her feelings to him, Anna continued to hide her emotions. Her best friend from the dance school, Audrey, was a truly vibrant and self-assured personality, radiating a fiery passion for success. They competed with each other in training, but each of them excelled in her own style. Anna honed her mastery with diligence, grace, and femininity until her movements became automatic. Audrey, on the other hand, captivated attention with her charisma and energy, and everything seemed to come easily to her. But the moment was approaching when both girls had to confess their feelings to Ben. Anna was still hesitant, and she could only sigh deeply and blush, averting her gaze. Audrey, with self-assurance and without delay, decided to win the guy over right in front of Anna. All of this was happening on the eve of the most important competition, the results of which determined the selection of dancers for outstanding collectives. Anna felt overwhelmed and disheartened. Everything was slipping through her fingers. Her dances were falling apart, and she could barely keep the rhythm. Moreover, her costume was far from perfect. Grace was shocked by what was happening. How could this happen to a girl on whom such high hopes were placed? She couldn't even make it into the top 10 participants, and it was a heavy blow to Anna. Gradually, it became clear that Anna's grand and noble dream of a great career and a glittering future had shattered and scattered into small pieces, like sand in her hands. It pierced her heart bitterly and painfully, like a sharp needle penetrating deep into her soul. She had invested so many years of hard work and sacrifices into this dream, and now, as if by magic, it all seemed in vain. Unfair circumstances had taken away everything she had passionately hoped for. Anna desperately wished for someone to come to her aid, listen to her, and perhaps even pity her. She needed someone to understand how important it was for her. However, when she returned home, she was met with unsympathetic criticism and hurtful words from her mother. A scandal erupted loudly, like a thunderstorm, and her mother's words struck like lightning, burning with fire. To her great surprise, this incredible scenario was further complicated by the topic of marriage. As always, as if by the laws of nature, decisions were made for her in advance, without giving her the slightest chance to express her own opinions or desires. If Anna had a more assertive character, she could have stood up and fought for her place in the studio, even if it meant risking everything else. Unfortunately, she succumbed to inertia and submitted to her mother's despotic will. Her own sense of self seemed lost somewhere inside, overwhelmed by circumstances and the authority of others. Before meeting her fiancé, Anna spent the whole week in nervous anticipation, barely sleeping. Almost all of her dreams were nightmares, dark and horrifying, where the repulsive man reached out to her with his oily hands, like something looming over her. Anna would scream in her sleep, waking up with her body drenched in cold sweat and her heart beating wildly, like a bird trying to break free from its cage. At last, the long-anticipated evening of the meeting had arrived, and they headed to a luxurious restaurant. To make the evening as comfortable as possible for her daughter, the mother allowed Anna to choose her own dress and create a hairstyle that reflected her own taste. When they entered the restaurant accompanied by their parents, the guests were already there and began introducing themselves. It was a big surprise for Anna to see that her future fiancé was nothing like the dreadful expectations she had built up in her mind. In reality, he was a confident young man, impeccably dressed and looking very stylish. His height, slim figure, long brunette hair, a strong chin, and a dimple on his cheek all contributed to a rather attractive appearance. He also impressed with his politeness and good manners, not neglecting chivalrous gestures, which couldn't help but leave an impression on Anna. Until this meeting, she had virtually no experience in interacting with men, except for her fellow ballet school classmates and her secret infatuation with Ben. For the first time in her life, she found herself so close to a representative of the opposite sex. Fred had been attracted to this young girl for a long time. Their first encounter happened at an event where girls from a special school were performing. Even then, Anna's tenderness and delicacy had captivated him. Her movements were graceful, like a smooth dance. She created art. Fred remembered her, and since then, he had often seen this stranger in his dreams because she was an indescribable enigma and a source of inspiration to him. He made the decision that he would do anything to win her heart. At that moment, he had grown tired of the company of glamorous and liberated ladies who seemed to cling to him like flies, and his thirst for purity and innocence knew no bounds. At first sight, it was evident that he would become her first and perhaps true man. The pursuit of Anna revived in him a long-forgotten zest and courage, causing the blood to pulse through his veins faster. When Anna entered the restaurant with trembling legs, he secretly smiled but kept it unnoticed. She simply dazzled him with her charm and perfection. Her precise figure and a dress that gracefully embraced her body, a soft lilac color, only emphasized her deep turquoise eyes, like two boundless oceans. Long golden hair cascaded onto her shoulders, creating the impression of thick and soft curls, and her cheeks had a blush of innocence. The guy realized that pursuing her with aggression, like an experienced conqueror, would only push away this wild paradise bird. He chose a subtler and more calculated path. Emulating a cat that plays with a mouse, he alternated between luring her and gently inviting her, giving skillful compliments, and occasionally switching to business mode, not allowing any room for liberties. He showered Anna with enormous baskets of bright scarlet roses and delicate violets, inviting her to concerts and festivals. At the same time, he maintained a distance and didn't rush things, guarding himself against hasty steps. This game brought him pleasure, and he invested all his skill into it, anticipating the finale, which, as he thought, wouldn't be long in coming. Anna, on her part, was completely immersed in Fred. He appeared to her as if he were a prince from a fairy tale, relying on his politeness, intelligence, and gallantry, and his compliments fell on her like a gentle rain of words. She felt like she had found true happiness and believed it would last forever. Their wedding was splendid and magnificent, gathering all their delighted guests. The long-awaited wedding night turned out to be divine. Fred paid special attention to Anna, aiming to make this important moment in their lives particularly unforgettable. He was gentle and even a little romantic, giving his young heart a significant value. The newlyweds moved to live in a luxurious mansion, and Fred's mother was not thrilled with this idea. It was hard for her to understand how they tied themselves to such an extravagant life and such unusual people. Finally, she had gained confidence that she had introduced her niece to a good person, and she now had peace of mind. Fred's parents expressed their full approval of their son's choice, even though the girl he had chosen seemed like a decent person. However, in their hearts, there was hope that perhaps Fred would soon leave behind his wild passions and find a life partner suitable for his status. The first few months of their relationship were filled with complete happiness. They couldn't get enough of each other, and every moment was filled with passion and tenderness. He shared his knowledge and experience with her, and she listened attentively, expressing her love in whispers, and he responded with equally tender displays of affection. Over time, Anna began to grate on Fred. He had managed to win the coveted trophy and satisfy his desire for her young, attractive body. He realized that his wife molded like clay in his hands, becoming whatever he desired. She instantly fulfilled all his whims, gazing intently into his eyes, forgiving his sarcasm, and striving to please him in every detail. From the very beginning, she attracted him, but then her boundless devotion began to irritate him. He craved passion, lively emotions, and dynamism, but she only offered him peace and tranquility. Soon, he realized that he didn't feel genuine feelings for Anna. After the passion faded, she stopped being interesting to him. With each passing day, Fred returned home from work increasingly alert, ignoring sleep and food. He began to show blatant rudeness towards his wife, and he realized that she had no intention of responding in kind. There wasn't even room for resentment in him. Anna couldn't understand what was happening, what her fault was. The more she tried to please Fred, the worse she fared. He would erupt in anger, get irritated over the slightest thing, and lose his temper with her. Anna had no idea what to do. Talking to her mother was pointless, and she had no friends or close ones after Audrey's betrayal. It seemed as though she had to become disillusioned with female friendship altogether. After 6 months of living together, when each day seemed more depressing and burdensome, they both began to feel truly weighed down. For her, each day got worse, and the once slender girl seemed even more exhausted. Her tense and irritated husband, who had uttered not a few harsh words, said at one point, "My God, what have you become? What happened to you? Later today, you will definitely go to the doctor, and I'll arrange for a medic to take you." After long months of anxiety and despair, Rachel was finally referred to a women's clinic. There, the doctor, looking into her frightened eyes, made a shocking announcement. She was pregnant, and the term of this pregnancy was quite significant. In the first moment, Rachel simply couldn't believe her luck, and tears of joy streamed from her eyes. She thought that Fred would finally hear this news and be happy that she was giving him an heir. She naively hoped that everything in their lives would go back to how it was before, and he would start taking care of her and the future child. Rachel put in maximum effort to prepare a lavish dinner. She lit aromatic candles, carefully chose an outfit that made her even more attractive, and waited for Fred to share the joyful news with him. The wall clock slowly slid toward midnight, and Rachel had to wait until midnight. When Fred finally appeared, he was clearly under the influence of alcohol, and the scent of women's perfume clung to him. He looked bewildered at the set table and at his wife standing before him as if nothing had happened. Despite his condition, Fred still sat at the table as if nothing had occurred and with a smirk said, "What's this, a celebration? Can't you sleep, Rachel?" Rachel decided to share her joy and began, "Fred, my love, I have wonderful news. You know why it's been so hard for me all this time? I'm pregnant, and you'll soon be a father. Isn't that wonderful? I'm so happy." With excitement and joy, she rushed to hug her husband. However, he abruptly pushed her away, expressing his displeasure. "Well, you can't come up with anything better," he muttered with these words, slammed the door, and went to sleep, leaving Rachel with her happiness and joy in solitude. Rachel cried the entire night. Tears of endless hurt and bitterness flowed as if they were never going to stop. A restless storm was brewing in her soul. She sincerely couldn't understand what was happening with her husband, why he had acted that way, and for what reason she had been left in this despair. However, it didn't even occur to her to take any action on her part. From childhood, she had grown accustomed to going with the flow, yielding to someone else's will, and even to her own fate. Throughout her entire pregnancy, Rachel largely avoided her husband, seeking to stay as far away from his attention as possible. The intimacy between them had completely disappeared, as if it had been obliterated forever. Fred only looked at his wife's huge belly and swollen legs with disgust. His thoughts became increasingly indifferent. "It's even disgusting to look at a cow, and why did I marry this fool? I should have slept with that naive simpleton instead, and that would have been it." And when, against all expectations of the doctors, a baby girl was born, Fred completely lost control of himself. In a fit of rage, he shouted throughout the maternity ward, "You said it would be a son, and what's this? But what more can I expect from you? The heir I need, and you can't even give birth to him. I didn't want a girl, I didn't want this. I need a real heir, not a crying girl." The nurses tried to console Rachel, saying, "Don't worry, men often react this way. We've seen many similar cases here. He just hasn't realized it yet." Once he holds his daughter in his arms, he'll love her, you'll see. But nothing happened. Fred not only didn't thaw, but he also didn't attempt to get closer to his little daughter. In her every cry, he saw only a source of a headache, and his feelings remained indifferent to this infant. Due to the baby girl's incessant crying, Fred developed a pounding headache, and he couldn't find a way to improve the situation. He exploded in anger and directed his fury at his wife, who was attempting to soothe the infant as if she had been crying for her entire life. Rachel, having done everything she could to comfort and cradle the baby in her arms, decisively retreated to the farthest room so as not to interfere with Fred. The man showed no concern whatsoever. He didn't even consider helping his wife care for the child, didn't offer to take the baby for a walk or hold her. His sole pleasure was that he could barely hear his daughters crying and could sleep in peace. Rachel seemed to have become entirely irrelevant to him. His wife and daughter became a heavy burden for the man, especially as Fred had met another stunning beauty. Her name was Kate, and she was the daughter of a well-known entrepreneur. Fred fell in love with her instantly. Sexy, with an outstanding bust and a mass of unruly red curls, she exuded self-confidence. Impeccably dressed, she knew her worth and presented herself skillfully. She didn't pay any attention to Fred at all. What can you expect from him? Yes, he's wealthy, but he's married, and he even has a child. Fred tried every possible way to win Kate over, and soon he completely forgot about his wife and child. He rarely visited home, and his wanderings left noticeable traces, which he didn't hide. He perceived women as if they existed on a different plane, empty space, or even a bothersome misunderstanding. He was cold towards his daughter, becoming irritated when she tried to snuggle up to him and kiss him. He sought to get rid of her presence as soon as possible by distracting her with toys. In return, Rachel silently submitted to all his demands, having long ago accepted his cold attitude. However, now Rachel had found the meaning of life. Little Lisa, the light in her life. Rachel caressed every little finger on her daughter's hand and breathed in the sweet scent of childhood. She adored every freckle on the baby. Outwardly, Lisa was the spitting image of her father, tall, dark-haired, and lively. Her personality was nothing like her mother's, and at an early age, she realized that her mother adored her while her father despised her. She felt it, but she wasn't about to stay silent. The more she pestered her father with questions about why he didn't love her and her mother, the tenser the atmosphere in the family became. When Lisa started first grade, something unexpected happened. Her daughter deeply sympathized with her mother and couldn't understand why she remained silent, why she didn't argue with her father and didn't hinder him in his cruelty. She begged her daughter not to interfere. Lisa felt that the future promised only deeper darkness and hopelessness, but even in her young years, she didn't give up without a fight. Small but remarkably persistent, she voiced her doubts to her mother. "Why is Dad so indifferent to us?" she insisted, and her little voice carried a thirst for the truth. "We can't endlessly hide our feelings and stay silent about the problems, Mom. I worry a lot for you," the girl sadly said, hugging Rachel as if trying to create a protective barrier against hardships and sorrow, as well as the negativity and hurt that had accumulated over the years. One day, these feelings burst out, like a storm that could no longer be contained in the woman's soul. Fred, as usual, arrived around midnight. Regarding Kate, he did manage to seduce her, and every day he lied, saying that he would divorce his wife. To his surprise, his wife stood at the doorway and immediately, without preamble, asked, "Fred, we need to talk. This can't go on like this. You have someone else, you're being unfaithful to me. And even our daughter feels that you don't love us. Please, tell me the truth. I'm begging you." After agonizing 6 long years, Fred finally couldn't contain the truth any longer and summoned the courage to express his true feelings. "Yes, I have another woman whom I love. Your presence has become unbearable for me a long time ago. I no longer want to see you here, as something is always amiss. So, both of you, get out of my house. You've grown accustomed to an easy life. Now, since it's turned out this way, be silent and leave my home." His words fell upon the young woman and her daughter like an icy rain, and they remained standing in the corridor, sheltering themselves in mutual sorrow and tears. Fred, like a beast, once again displayed his brutality, pushing Anya with savage force, and then callously slamming the door. The woman, on the verge of consciousness from pain, hit her elbow against the nearest surface, swaying from acute agony. Even in that moment, he didn't cast a glance at her, as tears obscured her view of the world. With great difficulty, step by step, she made her way to her room, where Rachel, upon hearing her mother's cries, began crying loudly and fearfully. The little daughter rushed to her mother, wanting to comfort and protect her from the merciless world that had so cruelly descended upon their family. They sat together, embracing, consoling each other. Their hands ran through each other's hair as they spoke. "It's him. Yes, I heard everything. I hate him. Why won't you leave him? He doesn't love us. You're so beautiful, Mom." The daughter pleaded with her mother to consider divorce. But the woman, as if justifying herself, said, "Lisa, we can't talk like that. He's still your dad. And where would we go? Grandma won't take us in. There's nowhere to go, you understand. We have to endure, my little one. Maybe Dad will change, and everything will get better for us." She comforted her daughter, although she knew all too well that Fred would never change.